Hello everyone. Here to tell you about our upcoming rum tasting for Friday, May the 7th at 6 o'clock. Now, we've done a few different spirits tastings. We did grappa, which was entirely a vanity project for myself. We did mezcal, which was so much fun, probably my favorite we've ever done. And of course, we've done quite a few Scotch tastings over this past year. But I wanted to dive into rum just once. We might revisit it in fall, but for now I just want to do this one to talk about the fact that rum isn't all much of a muchness. I think a lot of people will be familiar with Pussers. It's a classic rum from Guyana. It's kind of that big, heavy, barrel-influenced kind of tropical fruit and dense molasses character. But there's lots of different ways you can make rum. We're going to be sticking with amber rums here just to kind of talk about production styles. Within Guyana, we're actually going to stay around in that region, and we're actually going to talk about the last two wooden stills left in the world from Port Mourant and Enmore. These are really, really old styles of making rum. Produces a completely different style from like a traditional pot still or column stilled rum. These just little alembics made of wood. Absolutely brilliant. These are quite hard to get, but I was able to get enough to do this rum tasting for you. And then finally, we're going to change gears entirely and go to the French Caribbean, where they use the agricole laws, the same laws that govern French wines like champagne, like cognac, and even down to things like brie and camembert cheese. They do actually regulate rum in the French Caribbean, and they make it by a completely different method. They don't use molasses, they use fresh run sugarcane juice. It's a completely different thing. Tasting lineup, rum happily, a good deal less expensive than Scotch. So tickets for this one are only $25. So good value, a little bit of fun rum tasting on a Friday night. What more could you want? All that and more, May 7th, 6 o'clock. See you there. Main is on the So good value, a little bit of fun rum tasting on a Friday night. Good evening, everyone. Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine & Spirits here. Welcome you to our rum tasting. Now, we are tasting 4 rums tonight, going from the very familiar, if high-end, right into some very unfamiliar and different rums coming from the French Caribbean, made under the French agricole laws. Now we're tasting 4 rums tonight from the very old and very well-respected Pusser's Rum Company. Not actually a distillery, but it is the Pusser's Rum Company. We have their 15-year. From El Dorado, we have 2 of their single stills, but not really single distillery rums. And then finally, we will finish up with the Clément VSOP. Now, let us get some sample number 1. Thank you, by the way, to Mike Moy and his son Holden, who made us our fabulous Lego dioramas here for our pirate-themed rum tasting. They actually spent quite a bit of time putting these together for us, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to you both. That gave us our lovely rum holder, which has been so much fun. All right, so Pusser's Rum 15-year. So as we get in here, let us get in with this. Let's put that back in its little... That's probably fine. So what is rum? Get back to my notes here. I do know what rum is. I just did want to make sure I got through all the things. Rum is a spirit distilled from either fresh run sugarcane juice, in the case of agricole rums and some general rums, or far more commonly, it is distilled from molasses. Now, these days, most of your rum is made in the Caribbean, but originally rum was... Now, this is kind of interesting. We have some texts from India that talk about rum going back to the 7th century. We have a lot of talk about rum being made on Cyprus. It seems to be anywhere that sugar cane grew, people wanted to distill it into something. And if we're, summing up rum as a spirit distilled from sugarcane or molasses, then it was by definition at least an early type of rum. But when we're talking about modern rum, we do talk about the Caribbean. And very, very broadly, we're going to talk about 3 different types of Caribbean rum. We're going to talk about the English Caribbean, we're going to be talking about the French Caribbean, and to a lesser extent, because we're not tasting one tonight, we're going to talk about Spanish Caribbean rums. Within rum itself, we kind of have a variety of categories. We're going to be tasting 2 of them tonight. We have your classic dark rum. Traditionally, a dark rum would be made mostly dark by aging in very heavily charred oak barrels. There's also the addition of some distillers' caramel just to add a little bit more darkness. Generally speaking, your better dark rums will have less caramel. Your maybe, let's just say, call it your Lamb's Navy. That's going to be made with a lot of caramel. And we'll get back to Lamb's Navy actually in just a little while. Let's start with the Pussers here. Oh, that is actually more ridiculous than I realized it was. That's wonderful. So Pusser's is based on, but was not the original manufacturer of, and this is something that I think a lot of people are confused about. Pusser's rum and the British Navy serving rum on their ships never existed at the same time. There is no overlap whatsoever. Between 1655 and 1970, as if you served in the British Navy as part of your pay, and we'll use that term loosely because it was not exactly a high-paying job, and in some ways it more resembled slavery than anything else, you were served a tot of rum. Now, that rum came from British colonies in the Caribbean, predominantly Guyana, and as a result, after the Black Tot Day, July 31st, 1970, when the British Navy stopped serving rum, the jars became very collectible, and they were very much just glass mason jars sealed with wax. That recipe, that idea of the original British Navy rum, it had been copied over and over. Before the 1970 Black Tot Day, Navy rum was a real thing. Lamb's Navy existed by then, Wood's Old Navy rum. They were all aping the original Admiralty recipe that was only really available to the British Navy. Now, in 1979, a gentleman by the name of Charles Tobias actually went out, and he went to the British Navy and said, okay, guys, you're not in the rum business anymore. What's it going to take to actually get the recipe from you? So in 1979, 9 years after the end of actual British Navy rum, the Pusser's Rum Company was founded based on Guianan rum, the base Pussers, which we're not having tonight, we're having the upper end 15 year. It's actually a blend of 5 different rums, all from the British West Indies, all for this theoretical British Navy blend. Now, I'm told that the original Pusser's is very faithful. This 15 year, which is a minimum age 15, and comes in a much fancier bottle, this is actually predominantly from Port Mourant, which is, okay, let's talk a little bit about Port Mourant. Port Mourant is the rum distillery. We'll talk a little bit about why later, but we're going to be referring back to this a little bit. Port Mourant is the great granddaddy of the rum distilleries that we still talk about today. The rum distillery itself doesn't actually exist anymore, although the stills still do. But it was the model for Wood's Old Navy rum, Lamb's Navy, Myers Navy rum, and Planter's Punch, even like Gosling's. All of the kind of Navy-style rums that we talk about today, they are all being based on that original Port Mourant spirit made in Demerara, Guyana. Now, tasting method suggestions here. This one is at 40%. I believe the highest alcohol we have is a 43. Or are they all 40s? Actually, they're 40 across the board. So for me, at least, I drink overproof scotch on the regular, so I am not going to struggle with the alcohol in these. If you want to be like a true Navy sailor, you could try cutting them with a little bit of water, a little bit of lime juice, and a little bit of cane sugar to make a grog. But I'd recommend just drinking them neat in small amounts. Don't need ice for any of these. I don't think ice is going to improve any of them. I think it would broadly make them worse, because we're looking for the little subtleties. Now, I will admit that I'm going to have a little bit of difficulty tonight. Thank you very much to Jonathan, of Jonathan Bray of Secret Spirits, who loaned me the wonderful pirate outfit for tonight. The thing I didn't consider before doing this is I already know I'm really horribly allergic to Jonathan's cat. And being Jonathan's outfit, it of course has Jonathan's cat's hair on it. So I'm suffering a little bit with that. Okay, so if this is our, very nice bog standard sort of classic rum in the Navy style, right off the nose, you do get that burnt sugar, you get that kind of cooked banana, you get the big spicy notes. I get cardamom pod, I get something like mandarin orange. And then in the mouth, it's sweeter than I like a lot of my rums, and some of that's coming from the distilled caramel, some of that's coming from 15 years of aging in an oak barrel in the Caribbean heat, just concentrating those sugars down, concentrating the rum down, increasing the sweetness. And to a certain point, more old-fashioned rums do tend to be a little bit sweeter because that is what the actual Navy served. Grog was, of course, sweetened. And also it's a nice way to mix a rum. A dark rum without any sweetness, just all you get is those toasty, burnt, blackened, charred notes. You need a little bit of bittersweet to actually carry it off, or else the rum doesn't work. Your daughter just identified the molasses by smell. Well, you certainly do get the molasses on this one in a very big way. I would also argue you get the char in a big way. I get charcoal. I get something almost a little bit like an old wood stove creosote-y sort of smell. And it's very dense. It's very rich. It's sticky, and it's pervasive. It stays with you. And it's very calming. This is a rum that, we're going to get into some very challenging rums as we get deeper into this, but this is a rum that really asks a lot from you. This is something where, someone, not to name names, but someone wanted to get their dentist a really nice bottle of high-end rum. It happens on occasion. This is something that I would recommend to someone who just wanted to get something as a gift for someone because it's soft, it's safe, it's elegant, it's got a lot going on, and it's wonderfully decadent to drink. I think if you harken back to the Hepburn's Choice tasting with his Craigellachie, I thought the Glenrothes was by far the most interesting thing on the table, but I loved the Craigellachie. I loved how soft and accessible and just generous it was with the fruit and flavor. There's something to be said for something just being fun. It doesn't have to be all serious and all complex all the time. I actually had someone in here earlier musing between the Glenfarclas 12 and the Hepburn's Choice Inchgour, and it was the point I made was, the Inchgour is probably the better whiskey. It's going to be spicier, it's going to have more things going on. Every time you go back to it, you're going to learn something. But I don't desperately enjoy drinking that Inchgour. I don't particularly like the Inchgour distillery full stop. I've never had one that really made me stop and think and say, wow, I love Inchgour. Never happened in 20 years of doing this. But the Glenfarclas 12, while it's not the most complex thing in the world, it always makes me smile. It was the single malt that my father drinks. It's just, I almost said it was the single malt my father drank, like he was dead. He's not. He's very much alive. But no, it's the single malt my father drinks, and it reminds me of him, and it's a very pleasant spirit for me. So, you know what? Something like this. John's like, yeah, I'd be in for some Pussers. All right, I like that. I don't think he sleeps on the jacket. I'm just really allergic to shadow, Cindy. I think it's just being in the house full stop. And I think I'm more allergic to him than most cats. Becky gets the sea. She gets something salty. There's definitely a saline component to this. And it might be because Aaron is very quietly in the background playing sea sounds and gulls. So that might be slightly influencing my palate on this one. Okay, that was a wonderful start. Absolutely wonderful start. Number 2 is the Enmore. Now we're getting into our wooden stills. So let's talk a little bit about El Dorado and the Demerara Distilling Company Limited. Going back to the kind of 1780s, 1790s, in Demerara, Guyana, there were 300 or more distilleries. There is now only one, DDL, Demerara Distilling Limited, better known in this market as El Dorado. Now, what happened? Wildly swinging prices in sugar, crop failures, all sorts of different kind of economic problems of running a tiny little distillery on a tiny little island in the Caribbean. Now, when DDL kind of bought up these distilleries, they didn't do the usual thing of, I'm just going to buy Enmore Distillery, I'll keep the name, scrap everything else, and we'll just make Enmore in our own house off our own stills. They haven't done that at all, actually. Both Enmore and Port Mourant are made off original wooden stills. They're the 3 oldest stills in the world, and as much crap as we give column stills or coffee stills when we're talking about Scotch, the very original Coffey patent, the one that was made by Arley Coffey out of Ireland, this was actually one of the very first stills built to that original pattern in 1880, and it's literally like the very oldest column still that still exists on planet Earth, and it's made of wood, and it exists at DDL, formerly of the Enmore Distillery. Enmore Distillery itself was shut down in about 1999. In 2000, they moved it over to DDL, also known as the Diamond Distillery, and they actually started operating Enmore there. Aaron, could I bother you actually for a bit of water, like a little jug of water or something? I can't really switch from the Pussers to the Enmore without a bit of water just because it's so sweet. Speaking of scorching sun, this outfit is far, far hotter than it looks. It is absolutely scorching. And I'm really, really glad that we don't have the hot lights anymore that Aaron upgraded to LEDs like a little while ago.
You need to drink it or just rinse your glass?
I just need to rinse the glass.
Oh, okay. I could have got you. I'll get you the nicer
This is going to do just fine.
Okay.
I got this. Now, Enmore is a personal favorite. This was actually there's always kind of the idea, the impetus. I wanted to talk about Enmore because I really love it. I think it kind of falls behind in terms of fame Foursquare, which people call like the Pappy Van Winkle of rum, which is out of Barbados. It certainly falls behind Port Mourant, that is like the rum, the rum that every Navy rum in the world kind of copies and wants to be. There's also a third wooden still at the Diamond Distillery called the Versailles still, which I don't have on the tasting tonight, but I do believe El Dorado does make a version of. Enmore, being the column still, being the Coffey still, kind of is like thought to be the 3rd best. It's kind of the one that gets overlooked, but I absolutely think that's wrong because Enmore is just about my favorite one. Mike Malloy, who made our diorama here, he actually tasted the Enmore and initially didn't like it, and I said, no, I think it's actually going to be the best thing on the table. And he came back to me about 10 minutes later, he's like, you like the Enmore because it tastes like a damn Fino sherry, and he's not wrong. The Enmore here is not finished in a Fino sherry barrel, although I definitely would be into it if it was. No maps, but Grant brings up an excellent point. Aaron actually has a picture of that original 1880s Enmore still. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, no maps tonight. Demerara, Guyana is like a tiny region of a tiny island. God, I hope Guyana's an island nation or I just really screwed myself. No, there is no maps tonight. I actually had a ton of fun digging into this, but it took a ton of research. As much as I've, run a liquor store for 20 years and I broadly think I understand rum, I had to do more for this than I did for grappa. I'd say in terms of research, I've done as much for this as I did for mezcal, and I think that was the most research I'd ever done. Initially, I didn't think I had to go that deep, but as I discovered that Demerara Distillers and the Diamond Distillery, they didn't just buy up the names and burn everything to the ground like the Scotch industry is so fond of doing. They kept the stills, they preserved them, they brought them back in their original 250-year-old creaky glory and hooked them back up and ran them to the point where the Port Mourant still, the actual still has to run underwater. It runs underneath a vat of water just so it doesn't warp or split or break because it's, it's a wooden cask that's 250 years old that's under pressure. It's got boiling spirit in it. How do you actually, make that work? But yeah, this, I've got it on my screen now, this original Enmore column still, so interestingly different. How do you make a still out of wood? You have to apply heat to it. You would think that a wooden structure filled with incredibly flammable alcohol with a high heat source, being pumped into it constantly, would burn down in 250 years. But no, they're fine. They're still going, and I don't exactly understand how. And yeah, I love the Enmore. Okay, Enmore Distillery started in the early 1800s, and good luck to you finding a more precise date than that, by Edward Henry Potter. Closed, like I said, in 93. Stills actually ended up at the distillery in 99, up at Diamond. It is the world's oldest column still. It may be the world's oldest wooden still, full stop. The only debate is whether it's Enmore or whether it's actually Port Mourant. The question is not about the style of still. Port Mourant's pot stills are definitely older in style. There's just some documentation for the very early 1900s that Port Mourant might have replaced their stills at that point, which would make Enmore slightly older. Yeah, it's... How do I describe Enmore? I mean, you'd think, oh, well, it's a column still, so it's going to be like Bacardi or like Appleton's or like Havana Club. But it's not, because it's done in this like really antique wooden still. It has so much charm. It's got salt, and it's got like a very Venus wine character. It's got pears, and it's got a little tiny bit of like, almost like a bitter apple. I apologize. I only had a half ounce of the Enmore because I had to give the other half of this bottle to Mike.
I understand.
Because there was some things that happened with people that
have it.
Yeah. I apologize because it is great.
It's fine.
I just want to check in on my comments there, Aaron. Do we have a comment after Grant's any maps tonight on your side?
Yep.
Okay, I don't have those. No?
Sorry, I don't think so. I don't have any.
Okay, good. Either the comments aren't working at all, or we don't have any more comments. Either way,
Sure.
kind of much of a muchness. It's so much drier. It doesn't have that little bit of molasses, well, not molasses. The caramel that we're talking about when they talk about adding the caramel back, it's literally the end product left after making the rum. So the molasses is the end product of kind of making the sugar. If you take that molasses and then you turn it into rum, what you're left with at the end is this incredibly concentrated, dark, smoky, ashy caramel. That's what's then added to make the Pusser's 15, but is not added to the other three. I love how much drier it is. Oh, yeah, Devin's right. The tasting tonight was $25. Pricing on these, I really should have looked into that. I want to say they're all within $55 to $80. Now, again, don't quote me on this too hard, but I want to say 83, 55, about 75 for those, which is why we were able to do the tasting a little cheaper tonight. This is the one I just want to keep coming back to all night, but unfortunately I can't. But let it never be said that I was not very complimentary to something that came off a column still, because this is so pretty and so delicate and so just gentle and loving in a certain way. Like, I really like Enmore. This is like me trying to talk about Clynelish. There's a reason we've never had a Clynelish on the show before, because I just get really glowy and flowery and talk about it all night. The Enmore is just a personal favorite.
On.
There we go. Sorry, I had somebody want one of the whiskeys behind the tissue paper, so I had to go get them, and that's why the tissue paper is mysteriously gone. How do these compare to Black Tot? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I really like the Black Tot rum. I thought, the reason I'm looking down here is I thought I had a bottle down there. It may have gotten drank. Black Tot is also, at least in part, Dorado Demerara Rum. I don't remember everything else that's in it. Black Tot actually sent me a really cool kit right around Christmas time. They sent me all of the component rums that go into Black Tot, and then they sent me the cask strength version of the blend of Black Tot, and then just the standard. I know that there's a little bit of, I want to say Barbados and Jamaica also in Black Tot, so that I would guess that based on that, the rum would be slightly lighter, slightly drier, and not be quite as intense. But I don't have the Black Tot right next to the Eldorados to really compare them, so I apologize. I was really hoping I did just down there, but unfortunately I do not. Okay, how are we doing for time? Check my Pirate's Apple Watch here. Let's go on to number 3. This is the Port Mourant, the rum that every other rum wants to be, except possibly Foursquare. Port Mourant comes off of a wooden still, actually a pair of wooden stills, whose distillation process is so completely Byzantine, so completely mysterious that I spent about 15 minutes because I really wanted to dig into how this stuff is made. I actually can't because the distilling process is completely different than anything else I've ever actually looked into, anything I've ever heard of in terms of distilling. It's... No, I almost can't describe it. But regardless, Port Mourant, just its very, very particular methodology of making it, which is as far as I'm going to go on that, it results in this incredibly heavy, incredibly rich spirit that's a result of having more reflux than any single malt scotch has ever dreamed of. And it ends up with having about double the number of congeners per ounce of any other rum in the world. Congeners are two things. They're one, the thing that give you hangovers, and two, they're all of your aroma, they're all of your flavor. Oh, Port Mourant is sexy. Now again, these are both 12 years old. These are both out of the same series. They're by the same company. They even come from the same building in Diamond Distillers DDL, but they're so different from each other. These are two rums made on antique wooden stills in the same building, and yet they're different as night and day, even at the same alcohol, even at the same age. Port Mourant's decadent. It's funny, I say Port Mourant, and the first thing that jumps in my nose is like, this smells like tawny port.
Oh, is that for me?
Yes, that's for you, Aaron.
Love you, thank you. This is for Aaron.
Sean's saying if you knew there would have been a costume, you would have made it work. I do apologize for that, Sean. Making the costume happen was actually very easy. Jonathan really helped me out with this one. Also, he bought like the world's most incredibly elaborate pirate costume here. Do we want to have? Yeah, well, we're not doing a fashion show. That's
just go where you get the whole.
See, you get the pistol, you get the ludicrously long vest, you get the very tall boots. Yeah. Well, they're not quite tall enough. Fun story, the pants for this outfit are actually in Jonathan's laundry room, still hanging up. But the nice thing is I'm about 3 inches shorter than Jonathan, so if the boots actually stayed up and or I knew how to fasten them up, you actually wouldn't be able to tell that I didn't have the official pants because I'm just slightly shorter. Ooh, some really interesting questions. Are quality rums like these ever moved from one barrel to another during the aging process like whiskeys? Yes, cooperage, good, intelligent cooperage, doesn't really change. I don't think that I've really ever seen, now I'm trying to think, have I seen a Madeira aged rum billed as a Madeira aged rum? Have I seen a sherry aged rum? I don't know if I have. So let me finish my original thought, in the sense that, yes, if a barrel starts going south, or a barrel starts leaking, or a barrel's not developing the character in the rum that they want it to after a year or two, yes, just good industry-wide cooperage practice says you do actually take the rum out of that barrel and you put it in a different one just because it needs to achieve a certain maturity over its lifetime. On the other hand, I think the question was, which I understood about halfway through, I'm not giving you a little twirl, Jeremy. The question I think was more referring to the special finishes we see on things, sherry barrel aged or something like that. I've never really seen that on rum so far, but I can't imagine it's not coming. Now, I shouldn't say that. Back when, the very first time I had an Enmore, Burke Laddie and also Murray McDavid, who were the same company at the time, they did a series called Renegade Rums, and they only did 2 or maybe 3 releases. And they did a Port Mourant, and they did a Foursquare, and they did an Enmore, and they did a few others. they did things like a white wine finish or a sherry finish or that sort of thing, but they were a Scotch whiskey company making rums. It's also twigging in my memory that Duncan Taylor did something like that. They didn't sell very well, but they did do, at least for me, they did do like a single barrel, like almost treat it like a single malt Scotch wood expression series for some rums. But those products unfortunately aren't on the market anymore. But I would be shocked if we didn't see some kind of creep back into the market at some point. There's too many good independent bottlers that I know that are interested in rum for it not to become a thing again. Oh, kind of cognac-y now. Wait till we get to the Clément. Wait till we get to the Clément. Now here, I hope you can draw some similarities with the Pusser's 15, because the Pusser's 15 is mostly Port Mourant at its base. There's that ashy character. There's that creosote. There's, you know, I think some people were saying this really tasted like the sea. No, this to me tastes like the sea. There's the salt. There's the richness. There's just this, you can see, and it's actually in the finish. It's got that, not quite burnt rummer, but like the really dark, like blackstrap molasses character. It finishes like molasses cookies. You get that unmistakable molasses bitter finish that every other Navy rum in the world has. And they all have that because Port Mourant does that. This is literally the reason. This distillery, this set of stills, coming from like 1730 something, this is why Navy rum, in all its various connotations, whether great, like Gosling's Family Reserve, or whatever the fuck Minhas is making these days and calling Navy rum, it all starts with Port Mourant. This is literally the rum for the whole Navy rum movement. I think it's fascinating to have it just straight up on its own qualities. Oh yeah, Jonathan. And yeah, I also really like agricole rums. There are very, very few that we can get in Alberta. To the best of my knowledge, I normally carry 2 from Clément. I carry the VSOP, and I also carry their Cuvée Omer, which is named for Omer Clément, the guy who actually founded the distillery. I don't know if there's another agricole rum company in Alberta. If there is, someone please tell me, and I'll list it immediately because I love agricole rums. The other thing I will be saying, after having tasted these, I will definitely, if it's still available, be bringing in the Versailles, the 3rd in the El Dorado single still series, because it is absolutely rocking. Now, did we throw any of those pictures of the actual Port Mourant stills up on the thing yet?
Yep.
We did? Okay, good.
Now.
Sorry, I don't watch the video feed, so I don't know what you're doing to a point. There's also a video, but I don't think you can probably find that in a reasonable amount of time.
What are the ones that have these huge, like...
So those are the swan necks coming out of the stills, and they don't look anything like the swan necks on like Scotch distillery stills, because those are very, you know, high and lifted and long with the big line arm. These are just this very short thing, which is why they have such insane reflux. Also, if Jonathan actually wants to make a stab at describing how Port Mourant's stills work, if he actually knows, he's welcome to jump in. I genuinely can't comment because, my lord, that's difficult. And thank you. It's an absolutely beautiful pirate outfit, Anne. Thank you for noticing. Is it okay to warm rum? Depends why you're drinking it. I probably... okay. I'm cheap. I wouldn't use any of these for a hot buttered rum, just because if you're going to add the brown sugar and spices and butter, I love me a hot buttered rum, especially Ryan, who just so recently left us, you know, not died, but he quit. Ryan's hot buttered rum recipe is absolutely exceptional, but I don't think I'd make a hot buttered rum with these. A, because I think you'd almost want like a slightly rougher rum to be able to absorb all of that butter and sugar and spice. But B, because these are so pretty, I wouldn't warm these and make them into like a hot rum toddy or a hot buttered rum. I'd want these neat, but I absolutely do love hot rum drinks. I think that hot drinks, hot spirit drinks, are really, really underrepresented right now. For years, I mean, of course I couldn't this last Christmas, but what, for the last 5 Christmases, for the week before Christmas, I've had either hot apple cider or like a hot English bishop available in the store for like pitcherfuls to people. Yes, I stole that idea from Perma Green during my childhood, but sue me, Perma Green, you haven't existed in 20 years. I really like hot rum. I just wouldn't do hot rum with these. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about upcoming attractions here just for a second. We do have a beer tasting coming up Wednesday night. I tragically will not be dressed as a pirate. I mean, I guess could be. No, I'm going up Tuesday to return the outfit. So no, tragically, I will no longer have the pirate costume on Wednesday. It will have gone back to Jonathan.
You'll be dressed as a fat tug.
Hurtful, Aaron. Very hurtful. So hurtful. I've lost weight. God.
You look great.
What a dick. No one likes Aaron. So we are going to be doing a driftwood tasting hosted by both myself and Patrick from Ethos Beer Distribution. I can remember Fat Tug being like an IPA you actually drove to BC to get. It was so incredible. I can remember ordering this from the BC LDB store in Fernie because they were like the only place in Western Canada I could really get it that wasn't like a 12-hour drive. And driving from Lethbridge to Fernie to buy like a case or 2 or 3 of Fat Tug Bombers because you couldn't buy it in Alberta. Now you can, and it remains an excellent, excellent reference IPA. I think it has aged far better than, say, Red Racer IPA. We're going to join that with 3 other of their hoppy beers. We're going to be doing the Raised by Wolves, which was kind of the next IPA that they did after Fat Tug, and I, these days, probably like better. We're going to do the Naughty Hildegard ESB. It's not a real ESB because it's too strong, but we'll get to that. This is a beer that I really love, and every time I bring it in and put it on the shelves, we end up blowing it out because it doesn't sell. That's a shame. And then finally, we're going to do the Original Gravity Haze, which is kind of Driftwood's nod to like the hazy IPA craze. We're going to do that as well. Haven't tasted it in ages. I think I've had it once. I don't recall it, so we'll see how it goes. But that is what is coming up on Wednesday. A little bit of IPA love on a Wednesday night. And, an English bitter, so nobody can say I only do IPAs all the time. Now, coming up Friday night, and also you're going to see our lovely promo, which I realized about 3/4 of the way through putting this outfit on, we hadn't shot the damn wine promo yet. So I'm going to have to shoot the wine promo in this after we finish. So that's going to be great. So that will be a very interesting wine promo. But we are doing kind of our almost stereotypical at this point, kind of best of what we think is going to be the summer rosés. We're going to do what I think are 4 of our best examples of a summer rosé. From Domaine Orlais, we have their Pusser Rosé. This is from the Jura, a very rare example of an inexpensive Jura wine. From Brock Cellars, once again, the Impetus wine. I have a complicated relationship with Brock Love Rosé. I've always thought it was much weaker than the red. I've always thought it was weaker than the white. This new vintage that just rolled in, the 2020s, pardon me. It's the best Brock Love Rosé we've ever had in the shop. I absolutely love the hell out of it. This is the impetus for us doing this. But having said that, let's see how it can do stacked up against 3 of our best rosés in the store. Mein Klein Prosa, I mean, what can I say about this? We've tasted it 2 or 3 times on the channel. It's a reference rosé. It's probably our best-selling rosé. I absolutely love it. And then finally, Lights 1-2 Dry Pinot Noir Rosé, my personal actual favorite rosé in the store, the one I buy for myself by far the most often. So it's a battle of the best. It is like the best rosé we can throw at you in a tasting. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm really interested to find out. So who knows? I don't think this is going to win, but it could. It could very easily. Also, we are capping this at 24 tickets sold, or yes, 23, because I need a set as well. And I only have 24 bottles of the Arbois Rosé left. So we will have 23 kits for that one. Right, while we listen to these awesome seagulls that you've quietly got in the background, let us jump into rum number 4. We need a rinse though. Oh, I could live in that Port Mourant. That's just spectacular. I mean, I could be oh yeah, I guess when I was, fun fact, we were drinking Driftwood, Jonathan and I, when I went up to pick up the costume. Okay. Frilly lace sleeves, not as much fun as they sound. Okay, let's move into the Clément here. Ooh, Sean's got an interesting point. The OG Haze is maybe not a real East Coast IPA. Oh, that'll be an interesting conversation to have with Patrick. I hope you join us, Sean, because be sure to ask that question, because it would be really annoying for Patrick, and I'm so into that. That'd be fun. Okay. So, agricole rums. These come from the French Caribbean. So they come from Martinique, Guadeloupe, and the other one I always forget, which is Haiti. I always forget Haiti. And these rums are made according to the French agricole laws. Now, these are the laws that say you can't, call something a champagne unless it comes from Champagne, France. They govern everything from the making of baguettes to the making of brie cheese to the making of anything in the French wine industry. But they also do govern, and it is actually on the bottle, appellation Martinique contrôlée, so it is under the AOC laws. It's a very specific way of making rum, whereas everything else that we've talked about tonight, and most rums in general, are made from molasses. Why? Molasses is a byproduct. It's available year-round. It's shelf-stable. You don't have to refrigerate it. You can buy it off the shelf in a carton at Safeways. It just sits around. It's fine. Agricole rum from the French Caribbean can't be made from molasses. It has to be made from freshly crushed, free-run sugarcane juice, which can only be made in season about 2.5 to 3, maybe in an exceptional season, 3.5 months of the year. As a result, it has to be made on a much, much smaller scale. It can't be made in anywhere near the quantities of, say, like a traditional rum. And it also tends to be made with a lot of French culture and a lot of French know-how, including things like using alembic stills, which makes it very, very cognac-y and very perfumed, which is why it's last. This is the youngest rum on the table. We go 15, 12, 12, down to a minimum 4-year on this. And yet it's still so pretty. I get cinnamon, I get clove, I get creme brulee, I get almost pencil shavings, I get graphite. There is such a warm navel mandarin orange fruit to this that's all through the nose. Can I just say, like, Scotch can be very serious. Bourbon sometimes is no fun at all, especially when you get into pricing. Rum's fun. We can do it for cheaper than our usual tasting. Everything on the table tonight, unless you don't actually like rum, it's all likable. We're going to get really shades of gray and, nitpick and say what's best and what isn't. Spoiler warning, it's the Enmore. I just love how joyful and fun and easy rums are, because I don't think there's anything here that anyone would buy and feel like they'd wasted their money. I think it's very easy to buy a whiskey wrong. Like, if you just finished your first bottle of Glenfiddich and you've really decided you're going to get into single malt and your next bottle is like a Lafroig, you're going to hate that. With rum, it's really hard to hate anything. Ooh, peanut's a great call, like peanut skin to a point. Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
And yeah, it's so dry. This has but again, it's not made from molasses. It doesn't have any pre-caramelized sugars added. Caramelized sugars do not ferment, or at least they ferment at a very, very low rate. This is dry. It's clean. It's cognac-y. Those gulls threaten to crack me up every time I hear them. And when I normally say orange, I'm thinking like Grand Marnier. I'm thinking cooked orange. I'm thinking like marmalade. This is fresh orange. This is Christmas mandarin oranges at the very early part of December when you're just starting to get excited about Christmas. And I just got the weirdest look from somebody who walked in, which is great. Why dress like this if you're not going to get strange looks? Now, I do want to kind of circle back to the Omer here, or pardon me, to the Clément. This was originally made by a gentleman named Louis Clément. Fascinating dude. He actually bought the original plantation in 1887 in Martinique, where the rum is made. He went to France. He was actually natively from Martinique. He went to France. He got his MD. He was actually the very first black medical doctor in France ever. Comes back in 1917, founds the Clément distillery, starts making rum. In 1996, we end up with the agricole laws being applied to the rums in Martinique, and we start seeing what was already kind of going on at the time, with mostly them doing the fresh cut sugarcane juice distillation, becoming mandated into law, becoming something that every rum in Martinique was going to be doing. But it kind of has a bittersweet ending. In 1989, 7 years before that, the Clément distillery itself actually closed. There was going to be no more Clément. But just like with the Diamond distillery in Demerara, they didn't just scrap the stills. They didn't throw away all of that history. They packed up the original Creole stills that were original to the Clément distillery, and they moved them to the Simone distillery just slightly down the road, and it's still made just like the Port Mourant and the Enmore, yes, in a different locale, but still on those original stills. Now, that's not something I've ever heard of happening in bourbon or in Scotch. It seems very unique to rum, and before like the last couple 3 days when I started digging into this, I had no idea that had happened at all. But where would we be today if, rather than just scrapping Little Mill for the copper value, if they just taken Little Mill and moved it to Glenkinchie? It was owned by the same company at the time. What if they just taken Little Mill stills and put them in the Glenkinchie distillery and said, you know what, we're just making Little Mill here now. I know that there's the water components and everything else, but you can make that work. I love how much I've learned about rum tonight with learning about like how these stills and this culture is stuck around. And yes, in Demerara, you could say, oh, well, there's only one distillery and they control the whole market. They're like the Bacardi of Guyana. No, they're not. They're absolutely keeping all of these woefully inefficient, completely not cost-effective stills that are 250 years old and something you have to run underwater to keep them running. They're still doing it, and they're doing it with love, and they want to create this unique character of these stills and preserve their heritage. I love that about the rum industry, and that's something I didn't know before doing this, and that's why I really enjoyed tonight. Elizabeth says Cinnamon Hearts Candy. Elizabeth and I are usually kind of on the same page. I get it, but it's distant. I'd say cinnamon, but I don't get like Cinnamon Hearts Candy. I don't get that like ultra sweet, like cinnamon gum sort of character.
Can I say something weird?
Go ahead.
When I first tasted it,
yep.
like, there was like an asparagus.
Like a green vegetal thing?
Green vegetal, but also like, I don't want to be crude, but it was like, kind of like the way your body breaks down, like when you dispose of,
it smells like asparagus pea.
When you have a leak,
yep.
Like it kind of like tasted, there was a bit of that like.
I think you're actually making it worse rather than just saying asparagus pea. But I'd actually turn that around and say, okay, yes, there's definitely a green vegetal thing here, but I'd actually say it's kind of that indefinable green growing plants thing I get from, say, Glenburgie. It has a little of that I think is very pretty. Oh, and I'm really grateful to our HVAC system that has been absolutely pounding out the cold air ever since I put this coat on. I'm actually comfortable for the first time tonight, so that's wonderful. Okay, so what have we gone through? We've gone through a little bit of rum history, a little bit of British Navy history with the Pussers. We've dug into kind of some differences and maybe changed some minds about column distillation, certainly mine, on the Enmore. We talked about a little bit about how when your distillery goes under, your 2.5 centuries of distilling tradition and history, it doesn't have to go down with the ship. It doesn't have to be lost. That, if you really care about shepherding and almost, the word I'm looking for is just not coming to me. Just being a really good steward of your distilling industry. If you want to keep it alive, even when the economics of it say you have to just have one big distilling plant for all of it, when you take very carefully all of those 250-year-old stills, you keep that distilling history alive. You just say, well, we're going to kind of do it in this co-op setting now. For all of these are operations that would have been lost. They would have been, well, the Port Mourant distillery was this thing that existed between 1820 and 1993, and it's been long gone and lost, and we have no idea what the original Navy rum tasted like. But the Guianas didn't do that. They kept the original stills. They still use them in their ludicrous water baths. And these are giant room-sized water baths. They kept it. And I love that about the rum industry. If we had this level of stewardship in Scotch, in bourbon, in, God knows, Canadian whiskey, we'd live in a much better world. And that's been my big takeaway from tonight. We tasted some cool stuff, like Port Mourant, to actually have it against, the Pussers, which is largely Port Mourant, but it's to have it as the reference against all the other dark rums I've ever had. To have the Enmore, that's obviously my favorite because it's so wine-like. I enjoyed tonight. I had a lot of fun. Rankings. Ooh. Yes, I did make a terrible mistake by not bringing you a sample, Jonathan. That was on me. I was not thinking on Saturday. Or Tuesday when I came and saw you. Kevin has 2-4-3-1. And you still think Kraken's your long-term winner? Well, Kevin's banned. We're going to find a way to take that top fan away from him. Sean has 2-4-1-3. Fair enough, because 1 and 3 are from the same distillery. Don just wants a bottle of whichever one I like best. Ooh, well, it's not going to be a surprise. I've been pretty transparent at which one I like best. 2-1-4 Giant Gap 3. Wow, a lot of hate for the Port Mourant, which I don't get. Is it because of the big bitter molasses thing at the very back? Because I really groove on that. I'm totally on board with that. Becky then comes in and says the Port Mourant's the best. Thank you, Becky. Grant 2-1-3-4. A lot of love for 2. And I'm really on board with that. It was my favorite too. For me, ooh. I'm going to go for a slightly different ranking. I'm actually going to go 2-3-4-1. Purely because that is just straight too sweet for me. I don't enjoy how much sugar is in that. Aaron, do you ever? I guess you didn't get to try 2. I apologize for that.
2. 4 is my fave. 4-3-1.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm right there with that. Oh, and Christopher won't rank these because it'd be like ranking his children. That's a lovely sentiment. If I had children, I would totally rank them. Okay, so thank you very much to Jonathan Bray of Secret Spirits for the loan of the absolutely incredible pirate costume. I will have this back to you very shortly. Thank you to Mike and Holden, who made our wonderful Lego pirate ship dioramas. Thank you to Aaron for putting together the production quality as always. This was honestly pretty darn seamless other than figuring out how to dress like this. And thank you to all of you for joining us. This was a lot of fun. This started out as a bit of a laugh. I think Craig was the one who commented, hey, it'd be funny if Kyle wore a pirate costume for the rum tasting. And we just said, no, screw it. That's hilarious. Let's do that. And we did. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. It's been a year, and I've had some rum. But I'm trying to think of a tasting that I actually did that I learned more from than I learned from tonight. The stupid rum tasting where we played seagull songs and I wore a pirate outfit. I think this actually might be the one I learned the most, which that's very on brand for us. The dumbest tastings are also the smartest ones. I love that. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. This was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. Have yourselves a wonderful evening and enjoy your weekend. Good night.